Welcome to the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California, here from the majestic Air Force One Pavilion. I'm Anderson Cooper. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm so honored to be standing next to First Lady Nancy Reagan. So nice to see you. Thank you very much for inviting us tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm delighted to have you here.
It's such an extraordinary facility. You must be very proud of it.
I am. I am.
Well, certainly so. Well, thank you again so much for hosting us tonight. This is, of course, the final debate before Super Tuesday, next week's Super Tuesday, when Americans in more than 20 states, including the state of California, will go to the polls. The traveling press pool, as you can see, is already here. So let's go ahead and meet the candidates. Governor Mike Huckabee, Congressman Ron Paul, Senator John McCain, and Governor Mitt Romney. As you can see, we have a stirring backdrop for our debate tonight. That is the actual plane that served as Air Force One for President Reagan and 6 other presidents from 1973 to 2001. The aircraft, known as tail number 27,000, was taken apart and then reassembled right here, and the pavilion that we're in was built around it. It is decked out just as it would have been during the Reagan presidency, complete inside with President Reagan's favorite jelly beans and his notepad on the conference table. While the photos are being taken and the photographers are starting to get ready to clear the room, I want to take a moment to thank our debate partners Politico as well as the Los Angeles Times, and of course Mrs. Reagan and everyone here at the Reagan Library and the people of Simi Valley.
I think Claire's going to come get you.
Over the next hour and a half, we're going to be asking the candidates about a whole range of issues, of course. I'll be joined in the questioning by Janet Hook, senior political correspondent for the Los Angeles Times, and Jim VandeHei, executive editor of Politico. Now, tonight, most of his questions will be coming from viewers who have been voting for questions online at Politico.com. And actually, those viewing at home can still vote on questions during tonight's debate. The only rules tonight is that there are no rules. We've simply asked the candidates to be reasonable in the length of their answers. No chuckles there. Of course, we're also mindful of what Ronald Reagan called the 11th commandment, don't speak ill of a fellow Republican. However, I've talked to at least one Reagan insider who pointed out there's a difference between speaking ill of a fellow Republican and being tough to a fellow Republican. No one was tougher and more formidable in debates than Ronald Reagan. That said, let's begin. The first question is actually a question that will go to all of you, but I'll start with Governor Romney. Ronald Reagan himself asked this question during a debate. During a 1980 debate, he suggested Americans determine who to vote for by asking themselves, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? So tonight, in terms of the economy, are Americans better off than they were 8 years ago?
Well, if you're voting for George Bush, you'd be very interested in knowing the answer to that. If you're voting for Mitt Romney, you'd like to know, are you better off in Massachusetts after 4 years of my term in office? And the answer would be decidedly yes. I came into a state which was very much in a deep ditch. It was losing money every month. We had a $3 billion budget gap. We had people losing jobs every single month. During my predecessor's term, we lost 160,000 jobs. We kept losing jobs for a couple of years. We got it turned around, began adding jobs back. We won some huge contracts to bring in some new employers into the state. Some of them haven't even built their facilities yet. We solved our budget problem, $3 billion budget gap, without raising taxes. We were able to do that in a way that I think surprised folks.
Let me just interrupt, though.
Yeah.
The question was, are Americans better off than they were 8 years ago? And as you know, there are a lot of Americans out right now who are very interested in the answer. They're not feeling particularly good about their home sales, the value of their homes dropping down, or the unemployment rate rising. How do you feel America's doing?
Well, again, I'm pleased with what I did while I was as governor, and happy to talk about that record.
Are you running for governor, or are you running for president, though?
Well, I'm not running on President Bush's record. President Bush can talk about his record. Washington is badly broken. I think we recognize that. Washington has not dealt with the problems that we have in this nation. Hasn't reduced our burdens on our middle class, hasn't solved the Social Security problems, hasn't dealt with the health care crisis that we have in this country, hasn't improved our schools as much as we'd like to get them improved. Nevertheless, this president did pull us out of a deep recession. He put in place 2 tax cuts, which did get the country out of a recession and help rebuild the country. Now we see ourselves headed apparently towards one again. We hope not. Whether there's a recession technically or not, one thing we know. Middle-income families are feeling squeezed, and people are losing homes. and people are having a hard time paying for their gasoline, and they're having a hard time paying for heating oil in places that's a big part of their life. And as a result, we got people that feel there needs to be a change in Washington, and that's something I represent.
Senator McCain, are Americans better off than they were 8 years ago?
I think you could argue that Americans overall are better off because we have had a pretty good, prosperous time with low unemployment and low inflation, and a lot of good things have happened, a lot of jobs have been created. But let's have some straight talk. Things are tough right now. Americans are uncertain about this housing crisis. Americans are uncertain about the economy as we see the stock market bounce up and down, but more importantly, the economy, particularly in some parts of the country, state of Michigan, where Governor Romney and I campaigned, not to my success, I might add, and other parts of the country are probably better off. But look, I think what we're trying to do to fix this economy is important. We've got to address the subprime housing problem. We need to obviously have this package go through the Congress as quickly as possible. We need to make the Bush tax cuts permanent, which I voted for twice. To do so, I think we need to eliminate the alternate minimum tax that sits out there and challenges 25 million American families.
It sounds like that we're not better off is what you're saying.
Pardon me?
It sounds like you're saying we're not better off.
I think we are better off overall if you look at the entire 8-year period, when you look at the millions of jobs that have been created, the improvement in the economy, etc. But I'm trying to emphasize, Anderson, that we are in a very serious challenge right now with a lot of Americans very uncertain about their future. And we've got to give them some comfort. We've got to give them some stimulus. We've got to give them some tax relief. We've got to stop this outrageous squandering spending that causes us to have to borrow money from China. And we've got to get our fiscal house in order. I think we went on a spending spree that frankly betrayed Ronald Reagan's principles about tax cuts and restraint of spending.
Let me just give the question now to, I said I would ask everyone. So Governor Huckabee, if you can briefly, are we better off than we were 8 years ago?
I don't think we are. And the real issue, though, let's not blame President Bush for all of this. We've got a Congress who's sat around on their hands and done nothing but spend a lot of money. And they're spending, leaving us $9 trillion in debt that we're passing on to our grandchildren. I don't blame the president solely for that. So I think if we're asking, you know, is George Bush responsible for all this? No. But are we better off? Well, let's look at some factors. Right now, home sales are, new home starts anyway, are down 40%. That's going to have a cascading impact on everybody who sells lumber, who is in the building trades. If you talk to people who are driving trucks across America today, their fuel prices are significantly higher than they were a year ago. They're hurting because they're not making a lot more money to haul something, but they're spending a lot more money to get it done. And all over our economy with unemployment up to 5% across the nation, that means there are a lot of families today that don't have a paycheck. And if you don't have a paycheck, it's hard to put groceries on the table and it's hard to pay the rent. And I think what Americans are looking for is somebody to be just honest with them and straight with them and tell them that no, it's not better. And it's not going to get better unless we have some serious leadership in Washington that says that we're going to have to start having policies that touch the people, not just at the top, but the people at the bottom. And they feel like they're invisible to a lot of people in government today.
Congressman Paul, 61% of Americans think there's a recession already. 61% of Americans say there's already a recession. Are we better off than we were?
No, we're not better off. We're worse off, but it's partially this administration's fault, but it's the Congress. But it also involves an economic system that we've had for a long time, and a monetary system that we've had, and a foreign policy that's coming to an end, and we have to admit this. You know, the Republicans were elected in 1994 to change the direction of the country because people sensed there was something wrong. We were going in the wrong direction, but we didn't do anything. In the year 2000, we did also. We were elected in the year 2000 to have a humble foreign policy and not police the world, yet what are we doing now? We're bogged down in another war. We're bankrupting our country, and we have an empire that we're trying to defend. It costs us $1 trillion a year. And the standard of living is going down today, but it's going down, and the middle class is hurting because of the monetary policy. When you destroy a currency, the middle class gets wiped out. Poor countries don't even have middle classes. We used to have one, and they're on the ropes right now, but it has to do with a fiscal